Hello everybody, welcome to another video. This is Chris Sage from Art City Tattoo, and today we're going to be going over an entire tattoo process. So you guys are going to be able to see my process all the way from not necessarily design, because I already have the tattoo design, but we're going to go over a little bit of the prep work and some of the thoughts that I go through in my head before I do a tattoo while looking at the design. And we're also going to be recording the entire tattoo, and I'm going to be commenting throughout the project in hopes that I can give you guys some perspective in how I go about doing my work. So in this specific project, I took a different approach because I've been looking at an artist that I really like their work. I think that he's extremely creative and a very, very successful tattoo artist, probably one of the most predominant tattoo artists in the industry right now. His name is Kozo, K-O-Z-O, and his Instagram is actually Kozo_tattoo. And if I were you guys, I would take a moment to just look through his work so you guys can really be amazed at the beauties, you know, the amazing work that this guy creates. And I was very inspired, and I decided that I wanted to do a piece that was inspired by his work. So there are some discrepancies in his work and mine, mainly because I feel like the way that he works, though it's stunning and it's very well applied, I think it's a little bit too soft for my own taste, and I think looking at his work, it might have an issue standing the test of time. I think his tattoos may fade a little bit as time goes on. So what I decided to do was I decided to create a design based on his artistic, on his, I guess, aesthetical taste, right? So I created a design based on some of his work, as you guys can see here on my screen. Very similar in concept, but I'm going to be making my own adjustments to this design that I feel are going to make the design not better, but if anything, just last longer in the skin, which is something that I like focusing on. So as you guys can see here, I already have the design prepared. The main thing that I'm going to be doing in comparison to his design, which is right here to the right, is that my tattoo is going to be significantly bigger than the ones that he makes. I believe that one of the reasons why he's not, you know, he doesn't, I don't want to say he's not able to, because I'm sure he is, but I think one of the reasons why his tattoos may come out so soft is because they're a little bit too small, for my opinion. I think if we can take this same concept and we can broaden it up a little bit, we're able to create a design that's going to be more solid, and it's going to hold up better over time. So that's number one. That's the first thing that we're going to do right off the bat. Second thing that I want to do right off the bat as well is I'm going to be outlining this design. Generally, you do want your designs to be self-contained, whether by using some sort of background, which in this case we don't have because that's not his artistic style, but he also does not put an outline on his work, again giving it that very soft, realistic look. But my focus is a different focus. My focus is I want this tattoo not just to look soft and realistic. My focus is I want this tattoo to look solid, and I want this tattoo to last a long time on the skin, right? So we're going to do an outline all throughout the entire design, on the silhouette of the Mario, also the silhouette of also the silhouette of Yoshi is going to be outlined, and also some other details of the design are going to be outlined, like the hands, in order to make them stand out a little bit. Also, the spray paint can is also going to have an outline, and I think these are just things that are going to make the design visually a little bit more, just a little bit stronger than his. Not to say that his are wrong in any way. It's just my own personal opinion and my own personal taste. And as I'm prepping for this tattoo, some of the things that I like doing is I like to use my color picking tool, and I'm going to basically, I've already done this, but I want to do it for you guys so you understand. I'm going to be picking throughout the design, and I have this like colorless tool right here that's going to help me see every color that I'm going to need. So for Yoshi, this design doesn't have a lot of color, but it does have some color, so we're going to go through every color, and that's going to help me determine what I need for my tattoo, what inks I'm going to have to pull out. So starting with the yellow star, this is obviously like a yellow pushing more towards orange, so it's like a golden yellow. And then the shadow of that yellow, it's in the same spot, so it's the same hue, just a little bit darker. And I can actually get that color straight out of a bottle that I have that color, but this color could also be mixed by mixing yellow with just a tiny bit of purple. It's gonna create that color. So that's if you don't have this color out of the bottle, you can always mix it by putting a little bit of purple, which is the complementary color of yellow. Then we're also gonna need this red right here, which is just a regular red with a little bit of white. I might actually just use straight red out of the bottle just to get a stronger look. We have grays, very neutral grays that I'm going to be using for Mario. The same grays I'm going to carry over to the Yoshi here, and to the spray paint can, and also to the shadows. So what is left is the color from this bottle, from the spray paint can, which is sort of like a cool red or a magenta red. And I don't necessarily have to be true to this color. I can switch it up if I want to. So I still don't know what color I'm going to use there, but essentially I know that it's going to be red. And there's a bounce light that's coming from the floor into the can, and it's giving me a lighter tone there. And as far as the body of Yoshi, we have green, which is, and I always like, when I'm picking colors, I like to define what hue it is, and I like to define whether that hue is more on the colder side or the warmer side. So is it pushing more towards my blues, or is it pushing more towards my yellows? In this case, this is sort of like more of a cooler green, which I have that exact color straight out of a bottle, and as it becomes lighter, it's still the same hue. It gets a little bit warmer, but not too much. So I'm probably going to use the same color. Excuse me, I'm going to be mixing it up with white to be able to achieve that lighter tone that we have here. This red is, if you guys can see here in the color wheel, it's actually not a warm red, it's more of a cooler red. So I do have a color that is called hot pink, that it pretty much matches that color exactly, and I'm going to be mixing that color with a little bit of white to get these colors that I have here. And then I have orange down here and yellow, which that's pretty straightforward. Orange is a color that you can mix with black to get a shadow, and you'll have no problem with that. You can also mix it in with blue if you want, which is the complementary color, and that's going to give you a shadow tone. But either way, it works just fine for orange. So if you just have a mid orange, you can mix it with a little bit of black and you can get that shadow color. But if not, you can use the complementary, and either way it's going to work. So that pretty much breaks down all the colors that I'm gonna be using. I already have them laid out on the table. So I'm going to finish setting up, and I'll see you in the tattoo. Okay, so we're getting ready to start here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to outline the whole design. I know it has a realistic look, but I think an outline in this tattoo is going to really solidify a structure. So I'm basically going to outline it as if I was doing an illustration, and then I'm gonna give it realistic lighting, and that's gonna give it that semi-realistic look. Okay, I'm using a single needle. So I'm using a one liner. I have learned through trial and error that you can put a very thin line on a realistic image, like a single needle line, and it doesn't really take away too much from the realism, but it does make the image more crispy, like more crisp and more clean and easier to read. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. And as far as my voltage goes, with the single liners, you have to be a little bit careful because since the needle is so sharp, and you guys are gonna see me that I'm sometimes I have to be quiet while I'm doing an outline, because like I've told you before, when I do an outline, I like holding my breath because it gives me more of a steady hand. So using the single needle, it's extremely sharp, and the skin makes less resistance to it. So I run it at a much lower voltage than I would normally run any other liner. I'm actually going at around like 2 volts lower than what I would normally run my bigger liners. So either my 3s or my 5s, I usually run them way faster than this. But in this case, I'm running it at like 10 volts. I usually run my liner at like 12 volts. I like running my machine pretty high when I'm doing outlines, because I want to be able to achieve it from a single stroke. And this is these choices that I'm making right now, guys, where I am doing this outline, it is not in my reference image, but I am doing it because I know it's going to give me a more solid tattoo. So I am making different choices than you will see in the reference image, just because I know it's going to read better. It's going to read better over time, okay? You guys will see when I start doing color on this piece, you won't really even notice this outline. But it does create a lot of structure, so it's extremely important to do this. And again, this is the way that it works for me, okay? Like, just because I'm doing it this way does not mean that this is the only way to achieve it. But I do focus my work on having a lot of structure, and I believe this is the best way to create a tattoo with lots of structure, okay? So, and the reason why I like having structure is because I want my tattoos to last a long time. I don't like touching up tattoos. I don't like having to go back. So by making these decisions, I'm saving myself time in the long run, and I'm looking out for the client, because they're not gonna have to come back a year later to get their tattoo touched up. And with the single needle, like, you have to be extremely light-handed, because it will It will damage the skin, like it'll cut the skin if you're not light-handed. If you're heavy-handed and you're rough, you will have problems with it. So this is probably the hardest needle to learn to maneuver, is the single needle. So if you're just getting into tattooing, you may want to start with bigger needle setups before you decide to move on to this needle. But it's a great needle to have in your arsenal. It's a great tool to have. You have to be extremely conscious of like staying on the surface level with this needle, because like I said, the skin doesn't really the skin doesn't really resist it, so it can go really deep really fast. So you have to be super careful in the way that you use this needle. And right now I'm wetting my cartridge. I'm dipping my cartridge in the water, because at this point the ink usually will start drying up on your cartridge after a few minutes that you've been using it. So it's always a good practice to make sure that you wet your needle every so often, you know, so you can keep a nice flow of ink going down your cartridge, because when it dries up, it stops the flow. And it'll start building up outside the way you guys see there. So I'm being very superficial. Like I said, I don't want a super thick, pronounced line. I just want to create some sort of border, you know, some sort of boundary, some sort of visual boundary, and it's also a boundary for the color ink. If you don't do this, you know, specifically like in this kind of design where, you know, most of the body is all green, you don't create these boundaries, it all just kind of mushes together. It all blends together over time. So this is, to me, this is essential. This is something that you have to do. Notice that how I'm noting here how always the object that overlaps the other object, it's what gets the line. So for example, in this case, the shoe is overlapping this fold of the shoe. So I made a line here, and then I'm gonna make a second line here that is implying that this fold is behind the shoe that's sort of in front of it. These are the little things that you wanna know about, and this is something that you can pick up when you practice your drawing skills. So the more you develop your drawing skills, the more you're going to be able to realize these things. Sometimes in your reference it's not as clear cut as you have to make it for the tattoo. So knowing this information is super important. That way you can make adjustments on the go. Right there I went a little bit deeper than I should have, so the line is a little bit darker than the rest because there's a little blowout, so it's fine. It won't be too noticeable, but it is telling me that I'm letting the needle a little bit deeper than I should, so I have to pull back a little bit. You know, we are human beings and we're not perfect and we make mistakes, so but it's really important to be present in your craft. You have to be present in what you're doing so you can detect those mistakes and you can adjust right away. When you're doing an outline like this, you want to make sure that your sight is not pointing to where the needle is. You want to make sure your sight is pointed to where the needle is going. You should already, I mean, your needle is going to be where it is already anyway, so it's important to look at where you're going rather than where you are. And right here, I've lost the stencil a little bit, and this is where my drawing skills are going to come in. And just through observing my reference, I'm going to be able to make up the information that is missing. So that's why I'm going to keep drilling to you guys like how important it is to work on your drawing skills and make sure that you have, you know, you're solid. You got to be a well-rounded artist. You cannot just depend on reference to tell you what to do, because sometimes the reference is not reliable. So you have to know what you're doing. And there's a state of I would say it's like almost like a meditative state or a flow state that you want to be in, where you're extremely calm and relaxed. That way you can make good choices when you're tattooing, okay? You don't want to be overwhelmed. You don't want to be stressed. You don't want to be in this like fast mode. At least for me, that's not how I like to work. I like to be in a very calm state of mind. That way when I make a choice, I feel it's the right choice. And you can only do that when you're calm. Okay, so far so good. So I'm going to work on this right hand right now. Now the body is overlapping this hand, so I'm going to work on this line first, and then I'll work on the hand that's behind it. had yesterday I was recording a podcast with one of my friends, with Ruben, and we were talking about what is necessary for a tattoo artist to be a good tattoo artist, a proficient tattoo artist. And the subject of form came to mind, came to the conversation. Like, you want to. There's something very, very. It's the main principle that you wanna be familiar with when you're doing any kind of tattoo, and it comes before lighting, and it comes before anything else, and that's understanding form, guys. Like, you have to understand how you can build a 3-dimensional form on a 2-dimensional surface, and that is the essence of what it is to be an illustrator, right, or a sketch artist. So this is something that is so necessary, guys. Like, if you're really serious about becoming a good tattoo artist, you have to understand form. And there's so much content out there. There are so many books available. I will also be doing content on this as well. I'll be making some videos on my knowledge on form. But this is essential. You have to be able to, when you look at a 2-dimensional drawing, you have to be able to, in your mind, see it 3-dimensionally. That's gonna help you to actually build something out rather than just copying it. Like, because I'm making sense of this image that I am creating, I am able to make my own adjustments, and the form is still going to be correct. And I feel like once you get that as a tattoo artist, you're pretty much half of the way there. At that point, you just need to understand lighting, and you have to obviously have practice. Practice makes perfect. You have to have a certain amount of mileage in your tattooing career in order to get better. But there are basic principles that you have to absolutely know before you can get there. And you guys will notice when I'm doing this with my pinky, what I'm doing is I'm actually applying ointment to the skin. Always want to make sure that the skin has ointment when you're working on your tattoos, because that's going to reduce the friction on the skin of the needle. That needle gets pretty hot and it gets really dry when it's going into the skin. So whether you think about it or not, like, the ointment it reduces the pain. I've tried it on myself. I've tattooed myself before, and I've tried it both ways, where I'm using ointment and no ointment, and the ointment definitely reduces the pain because it's reducing the friction, guys, and it's reducing the heat. You definitely don't want to tattoo somebody without ointment. That would suck. See if you can turn your leg out a little bit, Kiki. Just like that. Okay, so right here I want to separate both eyes with a line in the middle. Just like that. I'm basically thinking about the eye being inside the socket, so I'm drawing, as I'm drawing the outside of the eye, I'm also thinking about this is the cavity of the eye, you know, so I'm thinking about the form as I'm drawing it. And when you do that, it does create a structure. Okay. Okay, so I'm almost done with Yoshi. I'm just gonna close out the head right here. And I'm going to do the vertebrae in the back, the little spikes that he has. Just take your time, slow your breath, or hold your breath, whichever works for you. And now I'm gonna start working on this can right here. That's pretty much all that I need for Yoshi. Once I come in with the color, it's really gonna solidify it. But just that in itself is going to give me all the information that I need to create a clean, solid character. Now I'm gonna move on to the spray paint can. And we're gonna do the same thing here. Okay, so now I'm going to start working on the Mario. Mario's being done as a statue. The thing with Mario is that Mario has some writing, some letters written on it. And that becomes a little bit of a challenge because the letters can be stained by any colors that I put next to it. So what I always do when it comes to this is I always follow a specific order, which is I go from darkest to lightest. So what I'm going to do is, in this case, is I'm going to do all the blacks. So all the outline that I've been doing on Yoshi and the can, I'm going to do the same thing on Mario. And then from that point on, I'm going to most likely work on the letters because I don't want to lose them, because they're already getting erased. So I'm going to try to work on those so I don't lose them. And then from that point on, I'm going to start working on just any additional shading that Mario will need. So once I'm done with all the outline, I'm going to start working at that point. By the way, I start from bottom to top because when you're working from bottom to top, it's less likely for you to lose your stencil because you're working and you're wiping away from the tattoo. Now, once I have everything marked, at that point, what I want to start doing is I want to start working from top to bottom. That way, I'm not wiping any of the, I'm not smearing any of the color, if that makes sense. So if I was to do color from bottom to top, as I'm doing the color, say, you know, the bottom of Yoshi is done, and then I'm going to work on the top. As I'm cleaning and I'm wiping away, that's going to smear into what's already been done. So it's kind of the reverse. I do the outline from bottom to top, and then I do my color from top to bottom. And it's kind of to avoid the same things. It's to avoid smearing, okay? In this area right here, I'm going to try to avoid wiping as much as possible. I'm going to dab instead because I don't want to lose what I have here. And you also want to make sure that your paper towel is dry. Very important that your paper towel is dry, because if it's wet, it's just going to smear everything and you're going to lose pretty much all the information that you need, okay? So make sure that you're working with a dry towel. Okay, so now I'm going to be working on the star, which I have it done as if it was a sticker on top of the hat. So because of that, because it's a sticker, I have to cast a shadow from the sticker onto the hat. And the way that I do that is I'm going to take every line that is facing down, because the light's coming, assumingly that the light is coming from the top, basically every bottom edge of the star is going to catch, it's going to cast a shadow, right? So now every single one of these is going to get a black line. Just like that. That's implying, and you guys can almost already see it there already. It almost looks like it's laying on top, right? And now I'm going to switch up to a bigger needle. I think this is, it's a three round liner, and we're going to use this needle to finish the outline for the star, which is a little bit thicker. So we do want to use a thicker outline. And we're going to build this line. So we're going to start pretty thin, and we're going to build it out to a thicker line. So right now I'm doing a double line. Doing a double line like this. I'm gonna work on the eyes. And I'll shade it in after, but I just want to make sure that I get the main shapes, and from there I can build upon that later. So just want to get my main shapes in. It doesn't have to be perfect, as long as it has the same shape, and I can build on that later on. Okay, so now that I have that, I can go in between my lines and I can shade it in. And guys, notice how my right hand is constantly stretching the skin. Especially when you're doing outlines, it's super important to make sure that the skin is well stretched, okay? And I'm doing back and forth motions, okay? I don't do circles. We used to, in the industry, we used to do small circles when shading stuff in, but I realized that it chews up the skin a little bit. So I try to avoid using small circles, and I do back and forth motions instead of the circles. I prefer doing that. I feel that it saves the skin a little bit more. So make sure you're doing that, just back and forth, until you get everything colored in, okay? Just back and forth. Alright, so I'm gonna go through this real quick. I'm actually gonna switch over to a bigger needle because this one's gonna take me too long. So I'm going to grab a round shader. Just a 3 round shader. It's the same size needle, but the needles are a little bit more spread out. So it's gonna help me shade a little bit quicker. It does have a much thicker stroke to it, so I think I can get away with using a 5 round shader. It's gonna be a little bit quicker to get it done. And again, when I'm doing this, because I don't want to lose my stencil, I'm just going to go over this very fast just to make sure that I get all my shapes. And then later on I can go back and I can color everything in the way that I want to. Like I can, you know, fix it up or refine it. Okay, so I pretty much have this shape taken care of, and this is one of those tips about application that I think are really important. Is I did all of this with a 5 round shader because I wanted to have my lines, I wanted them to be a certain level of sharpness. I could have done it with a bigger needle, but if I would have done it with a bigger needle, some of these things would have not been as refined. So I always work from like smaller needle to bigger needles, and you get to a point where you realize like, okay, I may need a bigger needle now, and this is where I'm at right now. I could fill everything up right here with a 5 round shader, but it would take me a much longer time. So because that's the case, now I'm switching over to a 9 round shader, and that's going to allow me to get through this a little bit quicker. And I could come in with a magnum as well and get it done, and it would be even faster. But round shaders and magnums do saturate the skin at a different level. Magnums, round shaders saturate the skin a little bit more. So you would technically see the difference between using the 5 round shader and then switching over to a mag. That's why I'm deciding to use a round shader, just a bigger kind. But you could also just come in with a magnum and get it done. I mean, it's really up to you. I'm really meticulous when it comes to this stuff. I'm very particular with the needles that I use, and I want to make sure that it's a very specific needle for whichever job I'm doing. And that brings me to another point. Like when you feel like it's time for you to switch to a different needle, you have to listen to that voice. You have to allow yourself. You know, some people, they tend to be a little bit more on the lazy side. They know they gotta switch needles, but for some reason that just seems like too much work and they don't do it. And then that bites them in the ass because they're not being able to get the level of quality that they could have if they would have just switched to the correct needle. So make sure that when you're doing this, guys, like if the piece is asking you for a specific needle setup, that's what you have to use. You have to listen to your own voice. And that's something that I never stop to even think about it. Whenever I hear in my head like this is the needle that you need or whatever, I just simply stop, I grab the needle that I need. It only takes me a few seconds to make that switch, and I just know it's going to make my piece, it's going to get my piece to the level that I want it, you know. So if you want to do high level work, you can't cut any corners. You have to do what you're supposed to do. As simple as that. And that requires being patient, and it requires being thorough and doing the things that you have to do. I could have gotten this done already by using a bigger needle setup, but I just know this is the way that I'm going to get the best results, in my opinion, so that's why I'm doing it this way. Once you're done with something like that, you have to, I personally like to clean it up and review it to make sure that I don't have any holes left or anything, and if I do, I make sure that I go over them. And these are the kind of things that make the difference between a great tattoo and an outstanding tattoo. You know, taking the moment to just really review every single detail, making sure that it's perfect to your liking. That's gonna take you a long way, guys. Okay, and now I have this idea. I think I want to make the outline for Yoshi just a tad bit thicker, because what that's gonna do is that's going to imply that he's closer to me in perspective. So I'm gonna do that just around the silhouette of him. Okay, and now that I'm done with the outline, you guys can see how just by doing that line, now that line implies that Yoshi is closer to the viewer than Mario is, and it's very obvious. So because the can is somewhere in the middle, I'm gonna make the can a little bit thicker, but definitely not as thick as Yoshi. That way it also implies some sort of like difference in space. Okay, so we're gonna do that to the can. Now I'm gonna start working on these letters that I have written on Mario, and for that I'm going to use a round shader. I think I'm going to use a 5 round shader, and I'm just going to start off by doing them with straight red, and I might make adjustments later if I need to darken up some areas, but for now just straight red is going to be, I think, a good option. Actually, before I do the red, I'm going to do some of this black that's here, because I know that if I put that black later, it's going to completely stain the red. So, like I told you guys earlier, dark colors are always going to stain lighter colors. So, let me get this dark color out of the way first. Okay, so now that I have that, now I can work on my letters. They're almost gone, but I can still go by the reference and make them up. There's a very faint stencil there. So I'm just gonna look at my reference and look at the stencil and make it work. As a matter of fact, you know what? I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna use a marker instead, just to put them in again. I think that's going to be the more responsible thing to do. So I had to take out my gloves, guys, because I'm going to be using a Sharpie and I didn't want to cross-contaminate. So it's really important that when you're going to grab something that is clean, you have to take your gloves out, put new ones in. So I'm going to clean her skin up. Okay, now that I have that in a way that I like it, I can go ahead and proceed with my needle. That gives me just a little bit more security in the way that I'm working. So I'm going to use a dark red. Okay, now that I have that committed to the skin, then I can go back and I can basically finalize it. Okay guys, so that's what I got so far. I'm gonna move on to the ones on the top, and again, this is one big experiment for me. This is I'm doing this assuming I'm using this order based on what I know about the ink and the behavior that it has on the skin, and this is a point that I want to drive in for you guys, which is that, like, tattooing, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's just you're basically figuring out a series of problems that are coming your way, and you're creating strategies in your mind to be able to figure it out in a way that is going to work for whatever it is that you want to do. So just be mindful of that. Like, there's no right or wrong way. You can test things out, you know. Some things, sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't. But all you can do is try, you know. You definitely got to have some sort of game plan in order to get it done, and then move from there. So this is my game plan in this tattoo. Hopefully it works. Generally, most of the times it does work. And if it doesn't work out, there's always ways to fix it and clean it up. Obviously I have a lot of experience, so it's not like I'm going to make a big mess or anything, but you do have to try things out, you know, because every tattoo, every image is a different challenge, and you have to have a problem-solving mind in order to be able to approach every single one of these challenges. And the better that you get at that, the better your tattooings will be. Okay, so at this point I am done with all the outlines and all the lettering. So I'm moving on to start coloring in, and I'm gonna move, like I told you guys, from my darkest values to my lightest values, and from top to bottom. So I'm using a 9-round shader now, just to get into like all the little crevices that I need to get into. And then after I'm done with using my 9-round shader, I'm probably gonna move on to a bigger needle. Like I said, I always work from smaller needles to bigger needles, because I like getting into like all my small spaces first, getting that out of the way, and then I move on to the bigger spaces. That's just the way that I work. And now, because I'm shading, I've lowered my voltage way down. So earlier when I was doing my outlines, I was working, I believe, at around 10 or 11 volts. Now I am working at 7.5 volts. Okay, I might bring it up a little bit higher at some point to about 8.5, but for the most part I'm gonna stay right there at 7.5, just because this is a piece that is kind of small compared to what I'm used to doing, and I know I'm gonna be going around over the same areas several times, so I do want to be careful. I want to make sure that I don't hurt the skin, because like I said, I'm going to be working pretty much in the same area the whole time, relatively the same area, so I do want to make sure that I take care of her skin. And when I'm doing things like that, this is stuff that you want to do just very softly, you know, there's no rush. Just work at the pace of the machine, you know, you gotta sync your pace up with the pace of the machine, and just let the machine do the work. Like, you don't really have to force it. You don't have to do anything crazy. Just take your time, take it easy, let the machine do its thing. So right now what I'm doing is I'm working on my cast shadows, and I'm also working on my occlusion shadows, okay? You're gonna hear this word occlusion a lot. Occlusion essentially means the areas in the drawing where no light enters. So those are the only places in a drawing where, or in an image, or in real life, where you're gonna see that everything is absolutely black. Unless there's absence of light. If there's no light, obviously everything is black. But if you have light and you're seeing black somewhere, either that surface is black, or it means there's an occlusion there, meaning that the light is not being able to enter that surface, okay? So make sure you keep that in mind. Okay, now that I'm done with my round shader, I'm switching over to a bigger needle. I'm gonna grab a 7 Magnum. I'm still working relatively with small needles. Like, I'm not gonna be pulling out any really big needles in this piece for the most part. So there's a value here that's a little bit lighter than black. So I'm gonna put this value in first, because I don't want to make the mistake of making this too dark too quickly, okay? So I'm going to put this value here, which is, again, is very close to black, but it's not quite black. And that's, I guess, you know, when the light, when the surface starts getting closer and closer to the light, it goes from black to this sort of dark value. So this is the value that I'm putting in right now. And you'll notice how I'm working very slowly, taking my time, no rush. So I'm going to find that value everywhere in the picture, at least everywhere in this area, and I'm going to put it in. And then I'm going to come back with my blacks, and I'm going to fade my black into this value. And I'm also making sure that I'm sort of feathering things out, so it's not like a very rough transition between this color and the next color. So as I'm putting it in, I'm sort of whipping out, doing this sort of almost like a brooming motion, so that my color softens up at the end. I just noticed I have to be careful with these letters on the top, because this tone that I'm using is darker than the letters, so it will stain those letters. So I'm gonna have to move away. As I wipe, I'm gonna have to try to wipe away from the letters. And these are the things that you have to deal with when you're doing a tattoo. You have to make sure that you're not just drawing, but that you're applying your tattoo in a clean manner. And you'll notice here that I'm only doing a forward motion. I'm being very soft, very gentle, because I'm going to be going over this area quite a few times. So you want to be kind to the skin. Right here, I'm going to start transitioning to a black. You gotta try to not let your mind wander when you're doing this. The reason why I'm telling you is because my mind was wandering. It's really important to stay present with what you're doing. And I believe that the more present you can stay, the better your outcome is going to be. So, you know, tattooing and just doing art in general is just sort of like meditative practice. So if you can always try to like bring your mind back to the present moment, to what you're doing, and try to have a mindful practice of, you know, your craft. That's what's going to improve your skills as well, you know, because you're not just like on automatic mode. You're actually present. You're feeling what you're doing. You're seeing what you're doing. You have all your senses into it, and that's what's going to allow you to improve upon what you're doing, is being in the moment, you know, being in the space. Being in the present moment is super, super important in general in life, but also, you know, when you're working on your craft. And it's really good practice. And it can definitely also help other areas of your life as well, where you need, you know, mindful practice. I think mindful practice is one of the most important things you can do for yourself. So right now at this point, I'm starting to feel that I need a bigger needle. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to switch over to a bigger needle. So I think maybe an 11 magnum could do the work. I always try to go a little bit smaller than I can, just because I feel like it gives me more control of my needles. You know, the bigger the needle is, the less you can control it. And I like to maneuver my needles into the spaces and, you know, be able to work in tight crevices. So using a smaller needle, like I could do this with a much bigger needle, but I think an 11 is kind of like in the middle, you know. It's that sweet spot between what you could use, the maximum you could use, and the minimum you could use. Right here I'm going to turn my needle on the side a little bit, because I want this edge to be a little bit darker, because that's this is my terminator, which is basically where light and shadow meet. That's always going to be my darkest point in an object. So from that point, from this point right here, the bottom of the hat is going to start lightening up. Okay, so I want to get that sort of dark, and then I want to work my way into lighter tones. So this is going to be a little bit dark here as well, and as we get closer to the middle, it's going to start lightening up. So right there, that's a good point to start going a little bit lighter. Not too much lighter, but you know, I do want to see the difference. Okay, and now that I have that done, I can go back into it and I can make some adjustments with a smaller needle. I feel like I need a 7 now, so I can come in and I can make some adjustments to my values. And I'm only able to do this, guys, I'm only able to go over these areas so many times because of my voltage. The fact that my voltage is lower, it's allowing me to make these adjustments. If I had a really high voltage, I wouldn't be able to go over this area so many times. So be mindful of that. That's why when I'm doing these type of shading where I know I'm going to be blending a lot of times, I lower my voltage as much as I can. And I can lower it even more, just depending, you know, depending what I feel that I need. There's not a specific voltage that I have to be in order to make this work. I mean, the other day I was talking to an artist that we were doing a podcast, and he works with his machines so low, like he puts his machines at like think it was like 5 or 6 volts, which is so much lower than what I work at, and that's just the voltage that works for him. So like I said, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. This is just the way that works for me. Okay, and I'm pretty happy with that so far. So that's as much as I'm gonna do in that area. So now that I have the bottom of the hat, I think I'm gonna move to the top of the hat, get that out of the way. Now there's something that I'm realizing here with the top of the hat, which is the yellow from my star is going to stain my lighter values on my hat. So I'm gonna have to do my mid values first, then I'm gonna have to do my yellows, and then I'm gonna have to do my lighter grays. So having that in mind is super important, because that's what's gonna keep my tattoo clean. I'm also gonna have to be mindful as well down here, because I know these greens down here can also stain some of my grays. So I may have to do the greens before I do some of the grays. Definitely some of the lighter grays are gonna have to wait till the end to be done. And this is definitely one of the hardest parts about tattooing. You know, obviously, I mean, there's a lot of aspects that are happening at the same time, but you know, just being mindful, especially with color, you know, like making sure you keep an order, a sequence that makes sense and that is going to keep your tattoos from staining, you know, from being stained. That's a huge challenge, and it's not that complicated. You just gotta be super mindful of it as you're tattooing. So I'm trying to get all my darks out of the way, all my darkest darks out of the way here. Okay, so here's another occlusion right here. So I'm going to put that information in by putting black. Again, that means there's no light coming into that space. And then as it comes out of here, it starts lightening up, so I'm switching to a lighter tone. It's still kind of dark, but I already made some adjustments to my black, so it's not quite black. And then there's something happening here. There is an occlusion here that I wanted to do, but I can't do it with my magnum just because of the shape that it has. So I had to switch over to my round shader. I'm using a round shader now. And this is what I'm telling you guys, like if you see that you have to switch to a different needle, don't even think about it, just do it. Just do it. That's gonna make hell of a difference on your tattoos. I see a lot of tattoos that look amazing, and the one thing that they're lacking is that, you know, I can tell that they should have used a different needle and they didn't. So just that practice alone is going to take your tattoos to a whole nother level. It really will. So now I'm back with my 7 Magnum, and I'm putting a shadow here. And there's basically, so what I'm seeing in the picture, just so you guys know, hang on, let me finish this spot here right now and I'll let you know. This is why, and this is why it's so important to understand form, guys. This is a prime example right here. Let me show you. So basically, Mario is at a 3/4 view, right? Which means that I'm able to see two sides of his hair. There's one side right here, there's another side right here. So it's divided right here in the middle. So this side is in shadow, this side is in light, right? What the image is telling me is that this side that is in shadow, it has a terminator line right here, which is going to be my darkest point. But there's a secondary light that's coming from the right side, and it's lighting this side up. So it goes from a dark value to a lighter value, and then this side is going to be much lighter. So I'm going to put my terminator here, my dark value. And I'm obviously not being completely faithful to the image. I'm making my own adjustments, but I do want to convey form, so I do have to do some of what the image is telling me. So the image is saying that this is going to get split up right here because there's a shift in surface. You guys will notice how this will start taking shape. Now you can already start to see. I'm not even done with that side, but you can already start to see the form. It starts becoming more obvious. So this part right here is going to be much lighter now. And by understanding this, you can even adjust it to a point where you could put a different color in there, like a bounce light. You could do all kinds of stuff to this by understanding this simple concept. Okay, now I'm happy with that. So now I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna leave the lighter values for later. So now I'm gonna move on to the top side of the hat. I need to make an adjustment here for a cast shadow. Okay, so now we're gonna clean up. We're gonna start working on the top of the hat. It's a little adjustment I have to make here. very lightly. Okay, now we're gonna start working on the top of the hat. And like I said, with the top of the hat, I'm gonna have to have a different sequence. I'm gonna have to do my darkest tones first. Then I'm gonna have to move on to my mid-tones. Then I'm gonna have to do my yellows. And then I'll do the lighter tones. Okay, so now I'm gonna start transitioning to a mid-tone here. Transitioning to a lighter tone. This is still kind of a mid-tone. This is not too light. So I think I can get away with putting this in now. Okay, so now I want to go back here and I want to darken that point, because I do want to make sure that it feels like the hat has a fold right there. So this needs to be a little darker. And when I make these adjustments, I'm being super gentle to the skin, because the skin's already open and it's extremely absorbent. So all you have to do is just lightly graze over it, and it's going to allow the ink to settle in. Okay, so I'm at a good point right now where I can start working on my yellows. I think I'm gonna grab a smaller needle, because I want to get into those crevices. So I'm working with a 7 now, and I can speed up my voltage a little bit because I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty confident in the color that I'm putting in. So I'm going to speed up the voltage just a little bit, just to get that out of the way quicker. And let's see what color I'm going to be using here. So I'm going to be using a shadow yellow, sorry. Shadow yellow for the bottom of the star. Again, this is implying that the star is folding in the direction of it's folding along with the hat, right? So this part right here is going to be a little bit darker, and as it folds towards the light, it'll become pure yellow. Okay, now I'm going to be using my straight yellow on my lighter side of the star. And I'm whipping into my shadow so it all blends together. One thing that you want to know is that I'm moving my needle in the same direction. I'm not switching angles and directions on the skin. I'm trying to go always in the same direction. That's also going to save the skin. Okay, now that I'm done with that, I'm going to continue doing the rest of my grays. And now I'm going to dip into white because I want the top section to be as light as possible. But I don't want it to be white because, again, there's no background there to contrast again. So in the image it's pretty much white, like it has a rim light. But I'm getting rid of that rim light for the most part because there's nothing to contrast with. So I'm gonna use a light gray instead of a white. It's gonna look pretty good too, so. There you go. And I gotta do the same thing to the star as well. And I'm gonna have to be extremely careful here around the letters, guys, so I may come in with a round shader just to get in between all those letters, or a really small mag to be able to maneuver in between that. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna do there. I haven't figured it out yet. I think a small magnum is going to do the job, but I may have to use a round shader in certain areas just to be able to get in between the spaces. So I'm gonna try using my 5 magnum first, and hopefully this will allow me to get in there. Yeah, I think this needle is gonna do the trick. Okay, so I pretty much was able to get in all of those spaces with my 5 Magnum, so I didn't have to use a round shader, which I'm glad I didn't have to, because the round shaders, they do change the texture of the skin a little bit, so I think I was able to do a pretty good job with that. I'm gonna go ahead and finish out the rest of this hat, and then we're gonna move on. Okay, so I am pretty much done with the top part of the hat. I'm gonna have to wait, because I use a smaller needle, there might be some inconsistencies in the shading, so I'm gonna have to wait till it stops bleeding so I can go back into it, so I can look, and if there's anything that needs touching up, then I can do that after, okay? But for now, it looks good. I already know that I will have to make some adjustments, but I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now at this moment. So I'm gonna do the top of the visor now, and actually I'm gonna work on this. I'm gonna finish out the star first, and then I'll work on the rest of the visor. So for the star, I'm going to dip into my yellow and then a white, and that's going to give me the top edge. And then this rim right here, which is supposed to be white, it's also going to have a little bit of gray, because obviously at some point it's folding away from the light, so we're going to have to convey that as well. So right now I'm dipping yellow with white. That's going to give me this top area here. And now everything else I'm gonna do with a round shader. So you guys know, I don't know if you noticed that I didn't put the black of the star, I didn't put it all the way to the end, because I do want to use a dark gray there instead, almost as if that black is catching a little bit of light and it's becoming gray. Those are the little details that make a difference. So we're gonna do that. A little bit of gray here. And now, using a light gray, I'm going to make a shadow for this area. because this part of the star, it's supposed to be white, but it's in shadow, right? So we're going to put a little bit of light gray into that. And now I'm going to start turning into white. So now I'm going to clean up my needle. I'm going to dip in my white. And this already looks really good. At this point, I could move on to any other area. But I'm a little bit more meticulous than that. So I'm going to lower my voltage way down. And using the same round shader, I'm going to try to adjust some of the areas that I feel like are missing paint. There's some areas here that are missing, definitely missing paint. So we're gonna go back to that. Right here, we're gonna adjust, add a little bit more ink, more pigment here. That looks really good. And then I'm gonna grab a magnum. I think maybe this bigger, this 11 would be good. And I'm gonna lightly just graze over these areas right here just to make sure that they're fully saturated. Right here. Just a little bit. Just to make sure I get that full saturation. Right here as well. I'm adjusting some of my tones right here, making it a little bit more dark. Just to create a little more volume. And I'm just barely grazing the skin, guys. I'm being super light. Super, super light. I'm really happy with that, so I'm gonna move on, okay? So now we're gonna work on the visor, and we're basically gonna do the same thing. We're gonna start with my darker tones first. Right here, there's a dark tone. That's too dark. So I'm gonna adjust and make it a little bit lighter. I'm happy with that. And that, you guys see there, that's suggesting right there that there's a thickness. There's a thickness to the hat, right? Okay, now I'm going to start moving into the light by mixing my grays with the white. And that looks amazing, guys. You can see how much volume that's giving me already. You can do a lot of stuff by maneuvering the needle on the side. So, you know, obviously you don't have to switch your needle for every single thing. Like in this case, I'm using my magnum and I'm turning it on the side as I need to. So now that I'm done with the hat, I'm going to go ahead and proceed to basically work on all the rest of my darker tones before I move on to working on the Yoshi. I do want to do Yoshi before I do all my mid-tones, because like I said before, I know those greens are going to stain some of my grays. But but if I do my greens first and then I do my blacks, then the blacks are going to stain the greens. So it's about finding the right order to doing things. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on all of my dark tones right now. So this cast shadow that I'm doing, this is a cast shadow that I'm doing here, and as it gets closer to the bottom of the object, it's going to be black. And as it moves away from the bottom of the object, it's going to start lightening up, because that means that there's light that's starting to enter that surface. So the further away that it is from the occlusion, excuse me, the lighter the shadows become. And that's something that you want to kind of keep in mind throughout an entire piece. Like, you don't want to have any flat tones, because light is linear, right? Which means that because light is linear, there's a direction to it, which means that there's never going to be one single point in any object that has the same amount of lighting. And the way that you translate that into doing art is that you have to work in gradients. So anything you do always has to go from a darker tone to a lighter tone. Even if you're working on the same surface, even if that surface is being lit by the same light, or it's the same surface, it should always move from a lighter value from a darker value to a lighter value. So make sure that you keep that in mind as you're working. Even here, I'm doing it. I'm working on this shadow, but the shadow is not the same value all the way through. I'm moving the values to a lighter value as I move away from from the bottom of the mustache. So keep that in mind. And that, by doing that, it's going to give it a more realistic look. And you can already start to see by just doing the cast shadow how the mustache starts lifting off from the face. Very simple technique, but very effective, using cast shadows to create volume and space. So what I'm thinking right now is I'm going to essentially work from the top of the face up. I want to get that area finished, and then I'm going to start working on the Yoshi. So I'm going to finish the ear, which is relatively has dark values into it. I'm going to finish the nose and the top of the face, possibly, and then from there I'm going to start working on the Yoshi, and then I'm going to go back to the body and finish the work there. There's something very similar happening here to this side of the face as it happened on the hair. There is a terminator right here, which I'm going to do. Actually, it needs to be a little bit lighter. Just like that. And now this other side of the head, this little space that I'm leaving blank, is going to become just a little bit lighter. Just a little bit lighter in shadow, in value. And that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. And now I'm gonna work on this ear. It has some pretty dark values, so I'm just gonna get that out of the way. I know it's not gonna get stained up. And right here, I'm already moving. As I was telling you guys, it's always a gradient, so I don't want to use the same value all the way through. But instead, I want to start transitioning to lighter values. Even though I'm working on the same. I'm working on the same surface. Or rather on the same plane, not same surface. I'm working on the same plane, but I'm moving the values slightly one way or the other, just to imply that sort of directional lighting that we're seeing, okay? And you guys can already see how everything is starting to take shape. And I'm going to leave a space right there for a highlight. There's a highlight here in the image. I'm going to leave that blank space there so I can put a highlight in. Okay, we're going to do the same thing here. Okay, I'm really happy with that so far. I'm going to work on the nose now, same concept. And basically what we're doing again is we're going to do the shadows, midtones, and then light tones. Very simple. You break it down like that into simple steps, and it just makes your job really easy. You definitely don't want to be looking at an image and just allow yourself to be overwhelmed by it, because there's no need to do that. You know, you can break it down into simple small steps, and rather than doing one tattoo, you end up doing 1,000 little tattoos, but they're little simple tattoos as opposed to a complicated process. And that's how you take something that's complex and you simplify it so you can make it easy on yourself. So right there, that is step one. As you guys can see, that's my terminator. That's going to be my darkest point of that sphere, or in this case it's going to be the nose. The bottom part is catching a little bit of light, so that's going to become a little bit lighter. That's why I left that space. So I'm going to come in with a lighter tone, and I'm going to shade that area lighter, okay? There's probably some light bouncing off of the floor. There's light bouncing around all over, so That's why you can have a shadow and then you can have variation of values in that shadow, because there's additional bouncing lights that are just going all over the place, and they're lighting up the that side, and it just gives you a lot more volume too when you do that. It creates a better sense of space. I think I'm gonna stop here now for Mario. I think this is a good stopping point, and I'm gonna start working on Yoshi and on this can right here. I'm gonna get that out of the way, and then we're gonna go back and we're gonna finish Mario, okay? So we're gonna do that now. There's some cast shadows on the floor that they also create a sense of volume and three-dimensional space. So I'm gonna get those out of the way real quick. Right here. The trick to the shadow is to keep it soft, especially as it moves further away from the object. You want it to soften up a little bit more. So as it gets closer to the object, it's going to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to darken it up as I get to this side right here. That side is going to be darker, and as it moves away from the object, it's going to soften up, and it's going to be lighter because there's more light that is hitting that shadow. And one trick that I'm using here is when I dip into my color, in order to soften it up, you can dip into your rinsing cup, and that's just going to soften up the color, and it kind of helps you wash it out. Essentially, that's what you're doing. You're creating this sort of wash. It's a nice way of softening up. Okay, so that looks good. I'm gonna do that here as well. Okay, and I'm gonna have to be a little bit softer here because the skin's already open, so you want to be gentle. Right here, very gentle grazing of the skin because that skin's already open. So you don't have to do a lot. If you do too much, you will get like a hard transition. You won't get a soft gradient from one color to the other. So just very softly. And you'll notice here I'm also not stretching the skin as much, because I do want that softer transition. When you tighten the skin too much, it's really hard to get a soft transition. That looks amazing. We're going to carry that on to the other side. It's a little bit of shading right here as well. Same as here. And again, keep doing a whipping motion, just to make sure that any movement you do with your hand is going to reflect on the skin. it's cause and effect. So if you make erratic movements, you're gonna get erratic shading. If you have a nice, pace of movement, you're gonna get a smooth shading. Everything translates exactly the same. So if you want something to be smooth, you gotta move your hand smoothly. So right now I'm going for smooth. I want something that is smooth, is soft. It's like a very diffused kind of situation with my shadows. Okay, so now I'm gonna clean up so you guys can see. And just that effect alone, you guys can see how it creates this sort of like three-dimensionality to the piece. Okay, now we're gonna start working on the can. Just gotta make a quick adjustment here, guys, and then we'll move on to the can. Okay, so now we're at the can. And for the can, I'm gonna make just very simple shading technique. I'm going to first work on my terminator. If you're gonna hear that a lot, guys, this is where light and shadow divides, okay? And it's the darkest point of any object that is being lit by light, okay? So here's my terminator. That's gonna be my darkest point. And then usually I'm gonna play around with this concept. Like usually when you have a shadow side and a light side, the shadow side, it's a little bit more on the cooler side. So I'm probably just gonna take the same color that I'm using right now, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of white, and that's gonna give me pretty much a cool version of this color. See, it's like a cool magenta pink. I like that color. Very simple. And now as I move towards the light, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to warm up the red. So I'm going to take a medium red. That's a little bit warmer than the color of the Terminator. And look at that. You can see the difference already. I like that, because it implies a lot by just having those. Even though it's the same color, the same base color, which is red, you're getting different color temperatures, and that's implying like shadow and light. And I'm gonna leave a little space here for a highlight, which is basically a reflection of the light, which happens generally when a surface is really smooth. In the case of obviously metal, when you have a smooth surface like metal, light reflects off of it like a mirror. So we're gonna use that principle, and we're gonna put a reflection there in that little space that I left. This is not on my reference, but I'm just kind of making it up as I go. That looks so cool. And while I'm here, I'm going to just go ahead and just finish out the whole can, because there's nothing in the way of it anyways, so it's not gonna get stained. So I might as well just go ahead and finish out all my grays. There's a little cast shadow here from the tip of the can. Cast shadows, so I'm doing all my cast shadows first. I'm really happy with that so far. I'm going to put a dark value here to separate the tip of the can. And then the rest of that, I'm going to use a bigger needle to get it in there, because I think I was using a 5 round shader. I was either using a 5 or a 3. I think I was using a 3. So I'm going to get my 5. I'm gonna finish out this spot right here. Okay, that looks really good. Now I'm switching to my 9 round shader, so I can cover more surface area with it. So I'm going to be working back and forth between my 5 and my 9. And this part of the can is kind of shaped like a semicircle. So as I'm doing it, I'm also looking at the reference as well, even though I'm not being 100% faithful to it. But I'm also imagining how light would hit a ball, right? How light would hit a sphere. And I'm doing my shading according to that. Looking really good. Okay, and I'm gonna leave that space open for my highlights, for my reflections. Switching now to A5 because I want to get into these little spaces here, and I'm not going to be able to do it with a bigger needle, so you have to be willing to switch back and forth between needles according to whether you need it or not. Super important. Guys, look how good that looks. What a difference between something that's almost done to when you actually put the highlights in. You can see the finished result. It looks so good. Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys a chance to look at the can. You can see how cool that looks when it's all finished out. Look at that. That looks amazing. Alright, and now we're gonna move on to Yoshi. Okay, so now it's time to start working on Yoshi. I'm gonna start hitting up these greens. Whenever I'm going to start using a color and I'm not 100% sure that that's the color that I want, I tend to just lightly graze the skin with it just to see, because it can be adjusted, you know, especially if you just put a little bit on the skin, you can always adjust it. So you can start very slightly and you don't have to commit 100% to that color. So just keep that in mind whenever you're searching for the right color to do on a piece. Just kind of lightly hit the skin first and go from there. Okay, so there is a little bit of this orange is bouncing off into his skin, and it's giving me a little reflection there, so I'm gonna try to replicate that with my tones. Right here. That looks really cool. And there's also a little bit of it here on the bottom of the belly. So we're gonna do that there. Also right here on the bottom of the belly. Okay, so I'm gonna do the back of this tail just to figure out the palette that I'm gonna be using for the greens. But before I do that, I'm going to hit up this. I think I want to do the red for the shell. I think that needs to get done first, so I don't stain it afterwards. So I don't stain my tail afterwards. Okay, so now I'm going to a brighter red. And then I'm gonna add a little more white to get an even brighter red right here, or a pink. It's a very subtle transition, nothing crazy, but like I said, there always has to be some sort of gradient into what you're doing. So I think that's good enough. That's all it needs. This is my mid-tone for the body. I'm happy with this color. I don't want a lot of this color. I want the body to be a little bit lighter than this. So I'm gonna put it right here on this side. And this is literally like, guys, as I'm thinking, I'm kind of saying it out loud. So this is basically the way that I think through my tattoos. So now I'm using a brighter color, because that mid-tone is going to start being subjected to my light source, so it's going to start getting brighter and brighter. So I'm going to use this bright color. And now I'm going to start mixing that color into white, and that's going to give me my brightest point. and I am super happy with that. I love the palette, and now all I gotta do is just continue to do the same thing throughout the piece. So that's what we're gonna do. But I'm really happy with that. I love the way that looks. That looks awesome. I think I'm getting a short in the machine. Okay, so now I'm gonna start working on this hand right here, and for that I'm going to need to switch over to a round shader so I can get into all my crevices. So I'm gonna I'm using a 5 round shader. I may switch between a 5 round shader and a 9, I'm not sure yet, but I think I might be able to get it all done with this one as well. So okay, now I ended up switching to a 9. Okay, so now here I'm switching over to a round shader because I want to get into all the little crevices of the hand. And it's the same principle all the way through, guys. Is when you're doing an object, you want to imagine that object being either a cylinder or some type of square, some type of flat surface or some type of cylindrical surface, and you want to imagine how the light would hit that cylinder or how it would hit that sphere. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. When I'm looking at this finger, I'm thinking about it in the sense of it being a cylinder, not so much a finger. Things, for the most part, they're either spherical or they're flat in shape. So if you just keep that in mind when you're looking at an object, you can sort of break it down to very simple shapes, and that's going to help you. That's going to help you figure out what you need to do when it comes to lighting it. Okay, so I'm going to have my light tone here. I'm going to start doing the light tones for the fingers. And I found myself doing circles there. You want to avoid that hand motion as much as possible. Try to do back and forth instead. Just back and forth, no circles. Pretty straightforward, guys. It's shadows, your midtones, your light tones, and then you're gonna have your reflections, or your what people call your highlights. Notice what I did here, guys. I instead of just putting a shadow in, I decided to bounce some sort of secondary light into the shadow, just to give it a little bit more dynamic to the fingers and to shift up the colors a little bit, so it's not all just green. That's gonna look really good. I'm gonna use my light tone now, my lightest tone that I have available to me in my palette, right here. And then from that, I'm gonna start dipping into my white so I can get my highlights, or my brightest points rather. There's really no highlights here. And then as I move up into the hand, I'm gonna dip more into white, just to create that sort of gradient that I keep talking to you guys about. So as you know, the top of the hand gets closer to the light, it's gonna get brighter, and so on and so on, just like I spoke about, right? That's what I'm doing right here. And it's very subtle, like you might not even notice it in the picture, but I know I'm doing it, and I know that it has an effect on the eyes. So that's all that I care about. So in order to create the shadow to this orange, I am combining 3 different colors. Well, I'm combining orange into black into red, and it's giving me like a sort of like a dark red orange. And then from that color, once I have that shadow in, within the same shadow, I'm also adding a little bit of light. And the way that I'm thinking about it is I want that light to be on the cooler side. So instead of going more towards orange, I'm pushing it towards a pink. and that's going to give it a feeling like it's a little bit more on the cooler side, because it's moving away from yellow. Remember, as you go towards yellow, you go warm. As you move towards blue, you go cool. So if you have orange and you have pink, pink is going to be that cooler side of orange. So right here, just adding a little bit of pink. So I'm going orange, a little bit of black, back to orange, back to red. That's giving me my shadow color. I'm basically setting everything up right now so I can start putting in my midtones. It's always the same process, guys. It's just shadows, midtones, light tones, and in some cases you have highlights. Very, very straightforward. Okay, now I'm doing my mid-tone. So now I'm going to do the shadow to my yellow. I'm using a color called Dark Sepia from Eternal. And then from there, I'm gonna hit up my yellow. Okay, so here we're going to keep moving with the cast shadow for the body, the white part, which is relatively a light color. It's like a light medium gray, but you gotta consider that the local color for this is going to be white, so even just a medium light gray is going to feel dark in relationship to the local color. So that's why you don't need a color that is extremely dark to convey a shadow here. We're gonna lighten up this side as if there was an ambient light that's hitting the shadow. And these kind of stuff, you don't have to do it, you could keep it flat, but it just gives it an extra depth. So I like doing little touches like that. Okay, now we're coming in with the white to finish this part off. Now we're going to work on this side right here of the arm, and again we're going to use a mid-tone as a terminator here. We're gonna lighten it up as we come to the edge to imply a ambient light that's hitting the side. And we start using brighter grays here. We're not going towards white. We're not gonna hit white yet because there's no highlights in this area, so we're just gonna keep it a light gray in my lighter areas. Just like that. That looks really good. I'm happy with that. I'm gonna keep it simple. Okay, now I'm gonna switch to a small round shader, possibly a 3 round shader. I'm gonna finish the iris of the eyes. And I have to be careful here because this color is kind of dark and it can stain the other colors. So I have to make sure that I clean consistently. And you can also put Vaseline on the surrounding area to avoid the ink smearing on top of everything else. So I'm going to do a combination of those two things. Mix it into some white, into some white here, and I'm almost done with the Yoshi. All I have to do at this point is just finish out the grays in the eyes, and that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna start right here with a medium light gray. Medium light gray. And even though I'm not using that dark color, it's still in my paper towel, so I'm gonna throw that one away, get a new one so I don't cause any staining. This is looking so good. This is one of those tattoos that when I'm done with it, I get sad because I wish it was on me. Okay, and I'm gonna finalize the eyes by putting some white into it. Okay, that looks amazing. That looks so good. Super happy with that. Now I'm gonna put the reflections in the eyes. 2 little white dots. Very simple, but it goes a long way. I love that. That looks amazing. Okay, now it's time to finish off Mario, and then we're pretty much done. So I'm gonna try to get through this as quick as I can, guys, and I'll talk to you guys in a little bit. Alright guys, this is pretty much the end result. As you guys can see, there's something that I want to touch on actually before I finish the video, which I think it's a good point to drive home, which is it's okay with using other artists' work as inspiration, but you definitely never want to steal the work. And what I mean by that is you don't want to copy exactly what they've already done. This is a big no in the tattoo culture, and just in art in general. You never want to do that. You know, you wanna make your own work. This piece of work has been 100% inspired by another artist, which I already mentioned in the beginning of the video. But this is not something you're gonna find in his portfolio. This is something that I created, inspired by his style of work. So make sure that whenever you're creating any piece, any tattoo, you never steal somebody else's work. You never copy it straight as you see it into somebody else's skin. That is the worst thing you can do as a tattoo artist. But I think it's okay to have inspiration and to do something like this. I mean, I'm pretty sure he would be super proud of seeing this tattoo. So I hope that, first of all, thank you guys for all who stuck through the video with me. Make sure that you guys follow, subscribe to the channel, and like and comment on the video. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for sticking through. And I hope this helps you out, and I'll see you guys on the next video.